January 26, 1945, Hautesphere, France. The frozen ground cracked beneath his boots like breaking bone. Lieutenant Audie Murphy stood alone in front of a burning tank destroyer, gripping the handles of a .50 caliber machine gun as 6 German panzers rolled toward him through the fog. Behind him, his men were retreating. In front of him, 200 enemy soldiers advanced in disciplined ranks. The metal beneath his hands was scorching hot, flames licking at the hull, smoke choking the winter air. His leg throbbed from an old wound. His hands were already blistering. And in that moment, standing on a funeral pyre of steel, he made a decision that would define the rest of his life. Before we continue, I want to ask, where in the world are you watching this from? It's incredible to think that people from dozens of countries are all here, learning the same story, honoring the same history. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join this global community. We're building something special together. Now back to the frozen fields of France. Murphy squeezed the trigger. The machine gun roared to life, spitting fire across the white expanse. German infantry dropped like wheat under a scythe. He swung the barrel left, then right, methodical, relentless. The enemy hesitated, confused. They had expected surrender. They found defiance. And as the smoke thickened and the tanks rolled closer, Audie Murphy, 5'5", 110 pounds, 19 years old, held the line alone for over an hour. When it was over, 50 Germans lay dead in the snow. His company was saved, and America had its most unlikely hero. But heroism has a cost. And for Audie Murphy, the bill would come due every night for the rest of his life. To understand how a dirt-poor farm boy from Texas became the most decorated soldier in American history, you have to go back to a place where survival was the only skill that mattered. June 20th, 1925. Kingston, Texas. A tiny sharecropper shack sat baking under a merciless sun. Inside, Josie Murphy gave birth to her 7th child. They named him Audie Leon Murphy. There was no celebration, no cake, no gifts, just another mouth to feed in a family that could barely afford to breathe. The Murphy family lived on the edge of starvation. Audie's father, Emmett, was a sharecropper who drifted in and out of their lives, more ghost than provider. His mother held the family together with willpower and prayer. But willpower doesn't fill stomachs. By the time Audie was 5, he was working the cotton fields. By 8, he was hunting rabbits and squirrels to feed his siblings. By 10, he could shoot the eye out of a squirrel at 50 yards. Not for sport, for survival. School was a luxury the Murphys couldn't afford. Audie made it to 5th grade before the fields pulled him out for good. He learned to read just enough to get by. He learned arithmetic by counting coins that never stayed in his pocket long. But he learned something else too, something the land taught him every single day. The world doesn't owe you anything. If you want to live, you fight for it. Then in 1941, everything collapsed. Josie Murphy died, worn out by poverty and childbirth. Audie was 16, too young to be the man of the house, too old to pretend he wasn't. His father vanished for good. His older siblings scattered. The younger ones were sent to an orphanage. Audie stayed behind working odd jobs, carrying a weight no boy should bear. And then, on December 7, 1941, the world caught fire. Pearl Harbor. The Japanese attack sent shockwaves across the nation. In cities, people lined up at recruiting stations with patriotic fury. In Hunt County, Texas, a skinny farm boy saw something different. He saw a way out. Not from duty, though he felt that too, but from the crushing, suffocating poverty that had stolen his childhood, his mother, his future. The army would give him 3 meals a day. It would give him boots. It would give him purpose. All he had to do was survive. But the army didn't want him. Audie walked into the recruiting office in Greenville, Texas, with fire in his eyes and hope in his chest. The recruiter looked him up and down and laughed. 5'5", 110 pounds, baby-faced, no high school diploma, no work history beyond picking cotton. The answer was no. He tried the Marines, rejected, the Navy, rejected, the Airborne, rejected. Every branch of the military took one look at Audie Murphy and saw nothing worth saving. Most men would have quit. Audie Murphy wasn't most men. He went home, sat down with his older sister, and made a plan. They altered his birth certificate, changing his birth year from 1925 to 1924. Just one number, enough to make him 17 on paper, old enough to enlist with parental consent. She forged the signature. He memorized the lie. And on June 30th, 1942, he walked back into that same recruiting office and said the words that would change his life. "I'm here to serve." This time they let him in, not because they believed in him, because they needed bodies. Audie Murphy had no idea what war was. None of them did. Boot camp at Camp Walters, Texas was brutal. Endless marches, screaming sergeants, men collapsing in the heat. But for a boy who'd spent his childhood in cotton fields under a Texas sun, it was just another kind of labor. He endured. He always endured. Then came advanced training at Fort Meade, Maryland. Rifle drills, tactical maneuvers, live fire exercises. Murphy excelled. His hands, trained by years of hunting, were steady. His eyes, sharpened by necessity, were quick, and his mind, forged in survival, was calm under pressure. By the time he shipped out to North Africa in February 1943, he was still just a boy. But he was a boy who knew how to kill. The desert was a proving ground. Operation Torch had already broken the back of Axis resistance in North Africa, but the fighting wasn't over. Murphy's unit, Company B of the 15th Infantry Regiment, moved through heat and dust and endless waiting. Men got sick, men got bored, and then suddenly, men got dead. Sicily came next, July 10, 1943, Operation Husky, the invasion of Europe's southern underbelly. Murphy landed near Licata with the rest of the 3rd Infantry Division. The beach was chaos, mortar fire, machine gun nests, screaming men, and smoke so thick it blotted out the sun. He moved through it like a shadow, low and fast, carrying messages between units under fire. It was the kind of job that killed men quickly. But Murphy was different. He didn't panic. He didn't freeze. He just moved. His first kill came on a narrow road outside a Sicilian village. A German sniper had pinned down his platoon. Murphy crawled forward alone, inch by inch, until he could see the muzzle flash from a stone farmhouse window. He raised his rifle, exhaled, and squeezed the trigger. The muzzle flash stopped. His hands didn't shake. His breath didn't quicken. He just reloaded and moved on. Because for Audie Murphy, killing wasn't about hatred. It was about survival. The same skill he'd learned in the woods of Texas, just with higher stakes. Italy was worse. The invasion of the mainland began at Salerno in September 1943, and it was a bloodbath. German forces turned every hill, every village, every stone wall into a killing zone. Murphy's unit advanced through mud and rain and constant fire. Men died in front of him, beside him, behind him. He stopped learning their names. It hurt less that way. Then came Anzio, January 22, 1944. Another amphibious assault, another death trap. The Allies landed behind German lines, hoping to break the stalemate and push toward Rome. Instead, they were surrounded. For 4 months, Murphy and his men lived in waterlogged foxholes, enduring artillery barrages that never seemed to end. He caught malaria. His body burned with fever, shook with chills, but he refused evacuation. His men needed him. So he stayed, shivering and delirious, firing his rifle at shadows that might be enemies or might be ghosts. By the time Rome fell in June 1944, Murphy had been promoted to sergeant. Not because of seniority, because when officers fell, he took charge. When morale broke, he held the line. He didn't give speeches. He didn't inspire with words. He inspired by example, and in war that's the only currency that matters. But something was changing inside him. Every dead friend carved a piece out of his soul. Every firefight left him a little more hollowed out. He started having nightmares, dreams of burning tanks, of screaming men, of frozen corpses staring at him with empty eyes. He woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, reaching for a rifle that wasn't there. His hands shook when he tried to light a cigarette. His voice, once steady, had developed a slight tremor. The other men noticed. They didn't say anything, because they were all breaking too. Then came southern France, Operation Dragoon, August 15, 1944. Murphy landed at Yellow Beach near Ramatuelle. The invasion was supposed to be easier than Normandy. It wasn't. The Germans were retreating, but they were making the Allies pay for every inch. Murphy's unit pushed through thick forests and narrow mountain passes, fighting ambushes and delaying actions. One of those ambushes in October 1944 nearly killed him, the Quarry Valley. His platoon was pinned down by German machine guns firing from elevated positions. Men were dying, and no one could move. Murphy didn't wait for orders. He crawled forward, alone, through gravel and dirt and gunfire. He found the first machine gun nest and killed 4 Germans before they knew he was there. Then a bullet slammed into his hip. The pain was white-hot, blinding. But he didn't stop. He repositioned, bleeding through his uniform, and took out the second position. When it was over, his men advanced. He was 19 years old, wounded, and already numb to the cost. By January 1945, Murphy was a lieutenant. He led a platoon of exhausted, battle-worn men into the frozen hell of the Colmar Pocket in eastern France. The Germans were making a last stand before the Rhine. The fighting was vicious, desperate, and personal. And on January 26, 1945, near the village of Holzwihr, everything came to a head. His company was holding a defensive line in an open field. 6 German tanks and 200 infantry were advancing through the fog. Murphy called for artillery support, but the radios were frozen. He ordered his men to fall back into the woods. They hesitated. He wasn't coming with them. "Move," he barked. And they did. Because when Audie Murphy gave an order, you followed it. Alone, he faced the tanks. To his left sat a burning M10 tank destroyer, flames pouring from its engine. Its .50 caliber machine gun was still mounted and operational. Murphy climbed onto the smoldering wreck, wrapped his hands around the gun, and opened fire. The heat was unbearable. The smoke choked him. Shrapnel tore into his leg. And for over an hour, he held them back. He killed 50 men. He stopped 6 tanks. He saved his entire company. When the ammunition ran out, he climbed down, limped back to his men, and led the counterattack himself. The Germans withdrew. Murphy collapsed. And the legend was born. On June 2, 1945, Lieutenant General Alexander Patch presented Audie Murphy with the Medal of Honor. The citation praised his conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. Murphy stood at attention, his face blank, his eyes distant. He wasn't thinking about the medal. He was thinking about the men who weren't there, the ones who died beside him, the ones whose names no one would remember. By the end of the war, Murphy had earned 33 medals, including the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, and 3 Purple Hearts. France awarded him the Legion of Honor. Belgium gave him the Croix de Guerre. He was the most decorated American combat soldier of World War II, and he was 20 years old. But the war didn't end when the guns stopped. Murphy came home a hero, but he felt like a ghost. Parades, speeches, handshakes, it all felt hollow. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't relax. Loud noises made him dive for cover. He kept a loaded pistol under his pillow and woke up every night drenched in sweat, reaching for enemies who weren't there. Today, we call it PTSD. In 1945, they called it nothing, because soldiers didn't complain. Hollywood came calling. Actor James Cagney invited Murphy to Los Angeles and helped him get into acting. Murphy didn't want to be a movie star. He wanted peace. But he needed money, so he took the roles. Westerns mostly, quiet gunslingers who didn't want trouble but were deadly when pushed. He was playing himself over and over, until the lines between fiction and memory blurred completely. In 1955, he starred in To Hell and Back, the film adaptation of his own war memoir. He played himself, reliving every battle, every loss, every moment of trauma for the cameras. The movie was a massive success, Universal Pictures' highest-grossing film for 20 years. But for Murphy, it was torture. Every scene dragged him back, every explosion, every gunshot, every death. He lived it again. And when the cameras stopped rolling, the nightmares didn't. He struggled with debt, with addiction, with rage. He gambled recklessly. He drank to silence the voices. He locked himself in hotel rooms, armed and shaking, convinced the enemy was still coming. His marriages crumbled. His health declined. And through it all, he kept showing up. On set, at veteran events, at schools where kids looked up to him. Because even when he was drowning, he thought of others. That was his curse, and his quiet, heartbreaking strength. On May 28, 1971, Audie Murphy boarded a private plane heading to Virginia. The weather was bad, low visibility, heavy fog. The pilot wasn't certified for instrument flight. The plane crashed into Brush Mountain near Catawba, Virginia. All 6 passengers died instantly. Murphy was 45 years old. He had survived the deadliest combat zones of World War II. He had stood alone against tanks, bullets, and fire. But a quiet mountain on a foggy morning took him down. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. His grave is simple, just his name, rank, and dates. No list of medals, no grand epitaph, because that's how he wanted it. But even in death, he draws crowds. His grave is one of the most visited at Arlington, second only to President Kennedy's. People come from around the world to stand before the resting place of a man who gave more than anyone should be asked to give. Audie Murphy's story matters because it's not just about war. It's about what it costs to be brave when the cheering stops and the battlefield disappears. But the fight inside never does. It's easy to celebrate the moment a hero stands against impossible odds. It's harder to understand the quiet, relentless battle that follows, the kind fought in dark bedrooms at 3 a.m., with no rifles, no platoon, and no medals waiting at dawn. Murphy wasn't carved from marble or born with destiny shimmering around him. He came from dust-choked fields and hunger-hollowed days. A boy who carried the weight of survival long before he carried a rifle. He rose not because life made room for him, but because hardship sharpened him until he could cut through anything, even fear. But that edge came at a price. He fought for his country. He saved his men. He earned every medal they pinned to his chest. Yet each honor felt like a stone placed on a heart already bruised by grief. When he returned home, crowds saw a hero, but he felt like a haunted echo of the boy who left. The war did not end when he stepped off the battlefield. It simply changed uniforms. The enemy now lived in his memories, in every sudden noise, every quiet night, every dream that dragged him back into fire and snow and loss. Murphy rarely spoke of his pain. Heroes seldom do. Silence became his armor, humility his shield. And so his grave doesn't need to list his medals. It doesn't need golden words or carved declarations. The stillness around it tells the truth. Greatness often walks hand in hand with sorrow. The world remembers his courage. The quiet remembers his sacrifice. And in that quiet, his legacy breathes, solemn, enduring, unbroken.